My name is Robert Hayes. I'm 58 years old, and I live just outside Denver, Colorado. For 30 years, I built a life from nothing, a small construction business that grew into a real estate company most people in this city have never heard my name attached to. That was always by design. I never wanted attention. I wanted my son to have a normal childhood, away from the weight of what I owned. If you had told me 1 year ago that my own son would stand in front of 200 guests and call me the driver, I would have laughed. I would have said, my boy would never do that to me. But that night, standing outside the biggest ballroom in the city, wearing a plain black suit instead of a tuxedo, I found out exactly how wrong I was. This is the story of how my son tried to erase me and how one sentence spoken by a stranger changed everything. Let me take you back. My son's name is Daniel. His mother passed away when he was 12, and after that, it was just the two of us. I worked long hours, but I never missed a school play, never missed a game. I taught him to ride a bike in the parking lot of a building I hadn't told him I owned yet. Daniel grew up smart, charming, ambitious. He went to college on my dime, started climbing the corporate ladder in finance, and along the way, he met Vanessa. She came from money, old money, the kind that looks down on people who built their money instead of inheriting it. At first, I liked her. She was polite to my face. She asked about my handyman work, as she called it, with a smile that I mistook for warmth. I didn't correct her. I never corrected anyone. I let people believe what they wanted to believe about a quiet older man who wore work boots more often than dress shoes. I thought Daniel was happy. I thought I had raised a good man. The first crack appeared at Thanksgiving, 8 months before the wedding. Vanessa's parents were there, and Daniel introduced me to them as, my dad, he's in construction. Not he owns a company, not he built half the buildings downtown, just construction. I let it go. Maybe he didn't want to make a big deal of it. Then came the engagement party. I offered to help pay for the venue, a beautiful glass-walled hall downtown that Vanessa had fallen in love with. Daniel said quietly, almost embarrassed, Dad, it's fine. Vanessa's family is handling it. You don't need to worry about the money side of things. I remember feeling something twist in my chest. Not because of the money, because of the way he said it, like he was protecting his fiance's family from the truth of who I was. I still said nothing. I told myself I was being paranoid. A father's pride can make him sensitive to things that aren't really there. 2 months before the wedding, I overheard a phone call. Daniel didn't know I was in the house. I'd come by to drop off a toolbox he'd asked for. His voice carried through the hallway. No, don't worry. My dad's not going to embarrass us. He knows his place. I already told him to keep it low-key. Wear something simple. Don't make a scene. I stood frozen in that hallway. Keep it low-key. Don't make a scene. As if I was something to be managed. As if 30 years of sacrifice had earned me a warning label. I walked out before he saw me. I didn't confront him, not yet. I wanted to understand how deep this went first. So I started paying closer attention. I noticed how Vanessa's mother referred to me at every event as Daniel's father, never by name. I noticed how the wedding website, the one Daniel built himself, listed the bride's parents with their full titles and accomplishments, and listed me with a single line, father of the groom. No mention of a company, no mention of anything, just a placeholder. The night I found the wedding seating chart changed something in me. Daniel had left a folder at my house by accident, final details for the big day. Inside, I found the seating arrangement. Vanessa's family sat at the head table, close to the newlyweds, surrounded by business partners and society friends. My name wasn't at the head table. It wasn't even at a family table. I was seated near the kitchen entrance, at a table labeled, in Vanessa's handwriting, staff and vendors, extra seating. I sat in my kitchen that night, and I won't pretend I didn't cry. Not out of anger, not yet. Out of grief. Grief for the son I thought I'd raised, and the man he had quietly become instead. I thought about all the years I'd worked with my hands so he'd never have to. I thought about the fact that he was ashamed of exactly the thing that had given him everything. But grief doesn't last forever in a man who spent his whole life solving problems. By morning, the grief had turned into something colder, something clearer. The wedding venue Vanessa had chosen was called the Aldridge Room, a glass-walled event hall downtown, considered the most exclusive venue in the city. Vanessa had bragged to everyone that her family had connections to get it booked 18 months in advance, when the wait list was normally over 2 years long. What Daniel didn't know, what nobody in that family knew, was that the Aldridge Room sat inside a building I had purchased 4 years earlier through a holding company under a different name. I don't run my businesses under Robert Hayes. I run them under Hayes Linwood Properties, a name nobody at that wedding would recognize. I hadn't told Daniel because, frankly, he never asked what I actually did all day. He assumed, and I let him. So when the wedding planner called me 2 weeks before the event to confirm final vendor logistics, thinking I was simply a contractor doing maintenance work on the property, I didn't correct her either. I just listened, and I planned. I want to be honest with you. This was never about humiliating my son in front of 200 strangers. This was about the truth finally being spoken out loud, in the one place it could no longer be avoided. I called my property manager, a woman named Carol who had worked for me for over a decade. I told her the date, the time, and exactly what I needed her to do. Nothing dramatic, no scene, just the truth, delivered at the right moment, to the right person. I bought a plain black suit, nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention before it needed to. I told Daniel I'd be there early to help set up chairs if needed, and he thanked me, almost relieved, like I was finally accepting my role for the day. I arrived 3 hours before the ceremony. I walked through the same doors I owned, past staff who had no idea who I was, and I sat quietly in the back, waiting. The ceremony went beautifully. I'll give Daniel that. He looked happy, genuinely happy, and for a moment, I almost let the whole thing go. Almost. Then came the reception. The toasts began. Vanessa's father stood first, talking about legacy, about family name, about the importance of marrying into the right kind of family. Then Daniel stood, glass in hand, and thanked everyone for coming. And then he said it. I want to thank everyone who helped make today possible, especially my father-in-law's incredible connections for getting us this venue. And of course, he added, with a small laugh that the whole room joined in on, my dad, our driver for the day, for making sure everyone's cars are parked. Laughter. Polite, cruel laughter. Vanessa smiled at me from the head table like I was a punchline she'd been waiting all night to deliver. I simply smiled back, and I nodded to Carol standing quietly near the entrance. Carol walked to the front, gently took the microphone from the MC, and addressed the room with the calm professionalism of someone who has managed 1,000 events. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said, but as the venue manager, I wanted to personally thank the owner of the Aldridge Room for hosting tonight's celebration. Mr. Hayes, would you like to say a few words? The room went silent. 200 faces turned toward the back table, the one labeled staff and vendors, where I stood up, straightened my plain black jacket, and walked to the front. I watched Daniel's face change in real time. I watched Vanessa's smile disappear entirely. I watched her father, the man who'd spoken so proudly of the right kind of family, go pale. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't list my accomplishments. I simply said, "Thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate my son. This venue has always been important to me. I bought it 4 years ago because I believed every family deserves a beautiful place to begin their story. I'm glad it could host the beginning of Daniel's." I raised my glass. To the newlyweds. I sat back down at my table by the kitchen. Nobody moved me to the head table that night. I didn't want them to. The truth had already done what I came to do. Daniel found me an hour later standing outside, away from the noise. He didn't say much at first, just, "Dad, why didn't you tell me?" "Because you never asked," I told him. "You assumed I was small enough to hide and I let you believe it for too long. I built everything I have so you'd never feel less than anyone in this world. I never expected you to make someone else feel less than, using me as the example." He didn't have a response for that. Vanessa never apologized, not that night, not since. But something shifted in my son. Weeks later, he asked to see the company, to understand finally what his father actually did with his life. I don't know if that marriage will survive what was built on. That's not for me to decide anymore. But I know this. The day I stopped hiding who I was the day my son finally had to decide who he really wanted to be. And if there's one thing I'd want anyone watching this to remember, it's that the people who quietly build everything are rarely the ones who need to prove it. The truth finds its own moment to stand up. You just have to be patient enough and strong enough to let it.